Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now, when you think about games consoles released in 1994, where does your brain go to? The Sony PlayStation maybe? The Sega Saturn? Even the Sega 32X? But how about the Rambo TV game? The greatest console of them all. Oh yes. Honestly, look at this thing. New 1994. How could you not want this console? We've got Rambo there, loud and proud. A totally official endorsement, I'm sure. We've got a multitude of ill-fitting fonts and colours. We've got new joystick. We've got a questionable amount of built-in games, and we've got a shock-bezeled transparent window. So we can peer at this miraculous console. The back of the box is even better. Turn your television into a challenging and exciting adventure for you and your family. The Rambo TV game console attaches easily to your television set and lets you choose from the largest and most popular selection of video games in the world. Games that bring together lightning-fast action, spectacular sound and graphics, and intriguing game design. Educational games that stimulate the mind and spark the imagination. The Rambo TV games console. A new world in home entertainment. Hell yeah! Look at that selection of games on offer too. What have we got here? Yeah, all those classics. Actually, the console looks familiar, and the games look familiar. No. It's an Atari 2600 clone, isn't it? But the question is it in reality a disguised Famiclone like we've come to know? Because rarely do these box screenshots correspond to any actual reality. Or is it an actual clone of the 2600? I mean, just imagine creating this packaging and thinking, right, it's obvious it's an outdated console. I know, let's slap a Rambo from a 1985 film poster on the front. That should sort it. The problem is, they made one mistake. They forgot they were dealing with Rambo. Yes, this is very obviously a console that was made in China and then sold in various countries in the 90s, including many in Eastern Europe, with the premise to offer low-cost gaming and Atari 2600 compatibility, we imagine.
Including a game of Pac-Man free, if it can't.
Whilst we were drooling over the latest in CD gaming, some kids were digging into Rambo TV game. Some 17 years after the Atari 2600, or VCS as it was known then, landed in Western living rooms. That would be like getting your hands on an Xbox 360 now as a brand new console. Although it wouldn't be, because the difference between an Atari VCS game and a Sega Saturn game from '94 is miles apart from the difference between a 360 game and an Xbox Series X title today. This one claims to have a whopping 9,999 built-in games, but I've seen boxes that claim anything from 128 built-in games to 1 million built-in games. Can you imagine? 1 million games. It would take you your entire life to get through them. This one, rather cunningly, claims to have 2,600 games built in. I like what they did there, because are they talking about Atari 2600 built-in games or 2,600 built-in games? It's quite cheeky. Inside the box we get two joysticks made from the cheapest plastic known to humanity. We're talking lower quality than Kinder Egg toys. An AC adapter, one of those funky RF switches so you can flip between gaming and TV on the fly, an instructional pamphlet that's mostly in German, indicating that this particular console perhaps originates from Germany or Austria maybe. Although we do get a full side of English too, with 2600B TV game system at the top. And then there's the console itself, that feels like it could snap in half at a given moment. Clearly it's based on the 1982 Darth Vader 2600. The ports and switches are the same, but some have different names, and we'll come back to that. First, let's set this thing up. Just like the 2600, we've got a 3.5mm power jack, and also like the 2600 we've got a permanently connected RF lead, which means in lieu of modding, which no one would have the time for, we need to tune it in to the correct UHF channel. The problem is, when you're working with something as old and scrappy as this, that's no easy task. So, let's push the power switch.
Don't push it. Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Well, he wasn't lying. This is certainly a war with the TV's tuning function. But after some severe perseverance, we get a vague image. I mean, you can tell it's definitely an Atari 2600 clone. In fact, you can almost identify a game, if you can see through the jungle of noise and ignore the ear-piercing static that is. Yes, of course, it's Criminal Pursuit by Suntech, released in 1983. My favourite feature is being able to control the game by wobbling the RF lead. Honestly, this is the peak of this video. It goes downhill from here. By flicking down the auto search button, we would normally flip between colour and black and white modes on a normal Atari console, but this one will start cycling through its built-in games. Some games would use that switch for other purposes, so those games just aren't compatible with this particular console. Yes! Yes! Conquering this absolute belter of a game. Let's count them and see if we do actually have close to 10,000. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 1. 32 doesn't sound much like 9,999 to me, but then Atari 2600 games are notorious for counting all their different modes as additional games, usually accessible via the Game Select switch, although here it's labelled difficulty for some reason. Even so, that would mean that each game has 312 other modes each. I don't think so. Now, the games you get on this thing vary from console to console. Some are reported to have Atari's 32-in-1 game cartridge installed. This one doesn't. It seems to be an even more random mishmash of games. We've got everything from Dragon Defender to that, and even that. All playable through static vision. And there is no chance in hell I'm going to spend my time replacing any capacitors in this. Instead, I'll just hook up an actual 2600 via RF so you can see what things should look like. Look at this Light 6er VCS. So called because these original ones had 6 switches across the top rather than the 4 on later models. Look, it's so solid, so nice, so dependable. Honestly, the build quality between this Rambo console and a proper 2600 is like night and day. It's like comparing a basic WordPress website to a polished and gleaming Squarespace website. Squarespace, the sponsor of this segment. Yes, I can read your mind. You need a website. You need a website that you can have total control over, yet will look utterly professional. And that's where Squarespace excels. Just look at all these templates you can choose from, all these customization options you have available. You can add a shop, a blog. Your creativity is the limit. Drop on by to squarespace.com/nostalgianerd for 10% off your first website or custom domain and create something wondrous. Not like this piece of utter nonsense. God, this is so much nicer. See, it's possible to get a good picture over RF, even on 40-year-old hardware. I honestly never thought I'd be relieved to be using an actual 2600 joystick either. The rubber rigidity just feels so sublime compared to the utter plastic splinterfest that the Rambo joysticks offer you. The strange thing is, these joysticks are made each from completely different types of plastic. This one feels and sounds like it's about to snap in half, but ironically it's actually better than the other stick. I suppose it's nice that they give us a fire button on top of the stick as well with these ones, but it's like putting a bow on a turd where the bow happens to be carved out of the turd itself. Just listen to it creaking. You could use it for a haunted house sound effect bank. You've also got some nasty switches on the back of the console, like a standard 2600 for difficulty, and this switch, which would usually be for swapping between frequency channels. Here that's not really needed, and on some versions of the Rambo it would swap between game sets instead. Unfortunately mine seems to have only the single 32 game set, and that switch does flap all. Alright, let's open this up and see what's going on. Well, very little. There's a tiny board in here, which is apparently revision 3. You know, this would have been fitted to other Chinese clones of the console as well. There's an RF cable soldered into a socket, which you'll also find on Atari systems, as it happens. No shielding for the componentry here, though. And then over here, there are a few rather dubious looking chips. We've got a beefy 9435M, and a 1280 2P-1, and a tiny UM6583, which at least is from a decent manufacturer. If we tear open this VCS, then you'll find a huge lump of shielding, which underneath houses the MOS 6507 CPU clocked at 1.19 MHz, along with 128 bytes of RAM. But this block also provides important stability to the whole unit. This makes it easier for inserting cartridges and generally interacting with the console. The Rambo has this single plastic stump to do the job of that massive metal slab, and because of it, it warps like hell whenever the slightest breeze passes by. The general bendiness of the whole structure also makes it incredibly hard to get cartridges in and out, especially with the ill-fitting plastic guide plate. I can see why Sylvester Stallone is holding that rocket launcher now. It's to blow this damn thing out of existence. Rambo my ass! More like Ram dick! At least when you finally do get a cartridge in, the game does load up, so this appears to be a fully functional 2600 on a chip. It's a massively reduced 2600 in terms of quality, launched in 1994, and clearly designed to upset anyone who comes into contact with it. A bit like Rambo. But this was actually a more common thing in the 90s than you might expect. Famiclones might have cornered some areas, but if you wanted a budget gaming experience in most of Europe, then you'd have to settle for a 2600 clone. After all, by this point in the mid-90s, Atari games under Time Warner were purely concentrating on a few arcade releases, whilst Jack Tramiel's Atari Corporation really had zero interest in this ancient hardware, making it absolutely ripe for clone manufacturers. A while back I reviewed the TV Boy, which was just a handheld version of the Rambo TV game with a load of built-in games, and this was sold all over the place. Argos, Index, high street shops. My mind used to boggle at what it was back then. Of course, with hindsight, it's obvious. The Rambo console, with its dubious licensing and quality control, didn't quite make it to as many outlets as the TV Boy, but honestly, that's a good thing. At least the TV Boy had the good grace to condense everything down and give you a control pad, whilst this is still trying to carry a full 2600 flame, in a similar way that the monumental Strike Commando tried to carry the full, unfettered and undiluted flame of Rambo.
There's no one who can touch him in your whole damned army.
console didn't just go under the name Rambo TV Game. This clone was sold under various names and with various revisions, some more capable than others, some even played bank-switched carts. One such example is the appropriately named Game Over 2600, which sounds much better suited. Mine has no mention of its origins other than a Made in China label, but they're usually traced back to John Yuan Telephonic Enterprise Co., who made a variety of clones and cartridges. But these consoles, they all do the job they're intended to do, and they do it cheaply without too much fuss, much like Rambo. And I'm starting to see why they went with that name now. Of course, if you did want a Famiclone edition specifically, and why wouldn't you, then your luck may just be in, if you look hard enough. Until next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo. Rambo my ass. More like Rambum. Rambum. Yeah. Bumbo. Bumbo.